It's dark. Somewhere on a small island, something is moving through the undergrowth. Not hunting, not stalking. It doesn't need to, because the thing it's about to find has no idea what danger even is. It doesn't run. It doesn't hide. It doesn't even look up. 30 seconds from now, it will be dead, and it will not have understood why. This isn't a story about a bird that was too dumb to survive. That's the lie you were told. This is a story about what happens when a species forgets how to be afraid. To understand what happened to the dodo, you have to go back 140 million years to a continent breaking apart. A fragment of land tore itself from Africa and drifted into the ocean. Millions of years later, it split again into what we now call Madagascar and India. India didn't stop there. It kept moving, slowly. Almost nothing moves slower, 16 centimeters a year, about 2.5 million times slower than a garden snail. But given enough time, even something that's slow reshapes a planet. The friction of that drift pushed up an underwater mountain range, the Mascarene Plateau. A few peaks broke the surface. One of them was Mauritius. For a long time, it was nothing. A rock in open ocean. No plants, no animals, no name. Then, carried by currents and wind, life started arriving. Seeds, spores. The island turned green. But almost nothing that lives on land can cross 1,000 kilometers of open ocean. Almost nothing. Around 4 million years ago, a relative of the pigeon made the crossing. Flight will do that. It erases distance that would kill anything without wings. What it found should have felt like a trap. An unknown island, completely isolated, nothing familiar in any direction. Instead, it was paradise. Fruit, nuts, no predators, nothing hunting from the trees, nothing stalking the ground. So the birds stayed. Not for a season, not for a generation, for 4 million years. And over that time, isolation did something to them that isolation always does. Eventually, it started erasing anything they no longer needed. They grew larger. Island gigantism, without competition for food or threat of being eaten. A species can afford to grow, and the dodo did, from around 15 centimeters tall to nearly a meter. Their beaks changed too. From small and sharp for insects, to broad, hooked, built for tearing into fruit. But the most important change wasn't physical, it was neurological. Flight is expensive, it costs energy, and muscle and bone density the body could use elsewhere. On an island with nothing to flee from, flight stopped being an advantage, it became a waste. So, generation by generation, they lost it. And once a bird can't fly, and has nothing chasing it anyway, something even stranger starts to happen. It stops being afraid, not bravery, not confidence, an actual measurable erosion of fear response, because fear is also expensive, biologically. If nothing has threatened you in 4 million years, your body stops preparing for a threat that, as far as it knows, does not exist. By the time Europeans encountered the dodo, accounts describe a bird that would simply stand there, watch you approach, make no attempt to move, not because it was stupid, because somewhere in its evolutionary memory, the concept of predator had been completely deleted. That is the terrifying part. Not that the dodo was slow, that it was incapable of understanding it was in danger, even while it was happening. For as long as Mauritius stayed isolated, this cost nothing. Fearlessness is only fatal if something eventually arrives that deserves to be feared. Something eventually did. Arab sailors likely passed by first, then the Portuguese, but it was the Dutch, arriving in the late 1500s and settling by 1638, who changed the island permanently. They didn't come alone. Dogs, cats, rats, monkeys, pigs, species that had spent their entire evolutionary history needing to hunt, compete, and survive around threats, dropped onto an island full of animals that had none of those instincts left. Picture it from the other side. You are a rat. You step off a ship onto unfamiliar land, and instead of finding a hostile environment full of things trying to kill you, you find eggs sitting completely unguarded. You find birds the size of a grown man that don't flinch when you approach. There is no ecosystem on Earth that prepares a species for that kind of imbalance. Evolution doesn't plan for sudden catastrophic contact. It only reacts, generation by generation, And the dodo didn't have generations left to react in. The rats went for the eggs first. Nests, completely unprotected, on ground level, laid by birds with no memory of ever needing to hide them. Every clutch destroyed was a clutch that could never hatch, and a population that could not physically outrun what was coming had no way to outbreed it either. Then came the deforestation. The Dutch discovered Mauritius wasn't just a stopover, it was covered in valuable ebony hardwood. The forests were cut down fast, and with them went the last physical cover the dodo had ever relied on. Not for hiding from predators, they'd never needed to, but cover that had shaped where they nested, where they fed, the entire structure of their world, gone within decades. The last confirmed sighting of a living dodo came only 24 years after Dutch settlement began. Most estimates suggest the species was fully extinct within about a century of sustained human contact. A blink on the evolutionary timescale that built them. Here's the part most retellings get wrong. It's easy to make this a story about human cruelty, and there was plenty of that. Sailors did kill dodos directly, but the more unsettling truth is that direct hunting alone probably wasn't even the main cause. The dodo could likely have survived being hunted. What it could not survive was an ecosystem that had never taught it to fear anything, suddenly filled with things it had every reason to fear and no ability to recognize. Evolution doesn't build in fear for threats that don't exist yet. It only builds defenses in response to what's already trying to kill you. The dodo's ancestors escaped predators for millions of years by simply never needing to. That absence became permanent, and permanence, on a changing planet, is never guaranteed. This isn't unique to the dodo either. Predator naivety, the technical term for what happened here, has been documented in isolated species all over the world, from flightless birds in New Zealand to certain reptiles in the Galapagos. Islands are basically evolutionary vacuum chambers. Remove a pressure for long enough, and a species will lose the response to it completely, even if that response used to be the thing keeping it alive. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If an entire species can quietly lose an instinct simply because the threat wasn't present long enough to matter, what else, alive right now, has been shaped the same way? What defenses have we, or any species, quietly let go of, simply because nothing has forced us to use them in a long time? The dodo didn't go extinct because it was foolish. It went extinct because it was, for 4 million years, perfectly adapted to a world that no longer existed by the time it needed to be. Mauritius today looks nothing like the island the dodo knew. The forests are mostly gone. The predators it never learned to fear are still there. And somewhere in a museum, a reconstructed skeleton stands in a glass case. The only physical proof that an animal this strange, this specific, this unprepared for the world it was about to meet ever existed at all.